What if success isn't about earning more, but about having time to enjoy the life you're working so hard to build? Imagine ending another long day exhausted, wondering where your family time, personal dreams, and peace of mind disappeared. If you've ever felt trapped between career demands and the people you love, this episode will resonate with you. Through realistic conversations, relatable stories, and practical insights, you'll discover why achieving balance feels so difficult in today's fast-paced world, and how English can help you talk about these challenges naturally and confidently. Along the way, you'll master advanced C1 vocabulary, powerful idioms, and authentic expressions that native speakers use every day. Stay with us. You might change both your English and your perspective.
Yeah, that really is the ultimate question for so many of you listening right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're all chasing the phantom ideal of perfect equilibrium.
Right, totally.
And yet, almost universally, we just seem to be falling short. So today, we're going to tear down that illusion completely. We're looking at a wealth of insights and, psychological research to figure out why this modern obsession with work-life balance isn't just difficult, it's actually fundamentally flawed at its core.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is a big one. We want to completely deconstruct the myth of, having it all, and figure out how you can find a sustainable rhythm instead.
Absolutely. A sustainable rhythm is a much better way to frame it.
Right, because think about it. For decades, we've been sold this incredibly specific, shiny vision of success. The one. You have a flourishing career, a loving family, a rich personal life, a spotless home. And they are all just running smoothly at the very same time without any friction.
Spot on. It's an attractive image for sure.
Yeah. I like to think of the old self-help books describing this like 3 trains. You have the career train, the family train, and the personal life train. And this mid-century fantasy, they're all arriving at the station flawlessly on schedule, running on their own perfectly parallel tracks.
It's a very comforting, orderly image. And it's easy to see why it appeals to us so much.
Oh, without a doubt.
It makes you believe that the chaos of your life is just a minor organizational issue. It whispers that if you just buy the right letter-bound planner or download the perfect productivity app, you can be the master conductor of those 3 trains.
But the reality you and I and absolutely everyone listening actually experiences every single day is so much messier than that.
Oh yeah, completely different.
Life is not 3 trains running on parallel tracks. Honestly, it feels more like one wildly overcrowded platform where absolutely everyone is fighting to get through the very same set of doors at the exact same moment.
That is such a vivid way to picture it.
Right. It's your boss with an urgent request, your kids who need help with their homework, your partner who hasn't seen you all yet, your friends wondering why you vanished, and your own desperate need to just sit down and breathe for 5 minutes. They're all elbowing each other on that same crowded, chaotic platform.
That is a much more accurate metaphor for modern life. The platform is finite. And what's fascinating here is how this 3 trains myth actually sets us up for an inevitable, crushing sense of failure.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, because when those demands intensify, and they always do, since the platform never gets any bigger, something has to shrink. Usually the very first things to get pushed off the platform are family time or personal recovery time.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Right. And when you do finally manage to carve out a tiny little space just for yourself, what is the immediate psychological response?
Guilt. Just a massive, heavy, suffocating wave of guilt.
Spotlessly accurate.
It just creeps in, it sits on your shoulder, whispering that you should be doing something more productive. Let me share a story from the materials we've been reviewing that really illustrates this trap perfectly.
Please do.
So there's this guy, James. He's a marketing manager in Chicago. For years, James genuinely believed the myth. He believed that climbing the corporate ladder and putting in the grueling hours in his 30s would eventually buy him more freedom in his 40s.
A very common assumption, yeah.
Right. And he used this brilliant phrase. He said, "I thought success was a finish line."
Oh, a finish line. That is such a vivid way to describe it, and a wonderful piece of phrasing for you to incorporate into how you describe your own goals.
That really paints a picture.
It does. A finish line implies a hard stop. It implies an endpoint where the race is over, the physical struggle stops, your breathing returns to normal, and someone hands you a medal while you finally get to rest.
Spot on. James genuinely thought if he just hit a certain salary bracket or finally secured a specific director title, he would cross that finish line. He thought everything would just fall into place, the pressure would evaporate, and he could finally be the relaxed dad and husband he wanted to be.
But I'm guessing that's not what happened.
Not at all. Instead of freedom, every single promotion just brought him longer hours. It brought a heavier laptop bag. It meant more direct reports needing his attention. It meant he had significantly less physical and emotional energy for his wife and his 2 sons by the time he finally dragged himself through the front door at 7:30 every evening.
And this is where we have to fundamentally reframe the narrative for you listening right now. James's situation is not a personal failure.
Right, it's not like he just didn't try hard enough.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely. It is not because James is bad at time management or because he didn't color code his calendar correctly. It is a structural reality. The myth of having it all relies on a completely false, almost arrogant premise.
What premise is that?
The assumption that you, as a human being, have unlimited energy, unlimited time, and a world that politely cooperates with your daily plans.
Which, spoiler alert, for anyone who has lived on planet Earth for more than 20 years, simply does not exist.
Undoubtedly. And acknowledging that none of those things exist is not pessimistic. That is the crucial shift. Acknowledging your human limitations is actually incredibly liberating.
Liberating, I love that. How does it liberate you?
It changes the core question of your life. Instead of frantically asking, how do I do absolutely everything? You start asking, how do I make peace with doing a few things and doing them really well? This brings us to a major flaw in the very language we use to discuss this topic. The word balance itself is a trap.
Oh, I find this fascinating. Break that down for us. Why is the word a trap?
Well, think about the physics of the word. Balance implies a static equilibrium. Imagine a set of vintage brass scales. You put the weights on each side, they level out perfectly horizontally, and they stay there.
Right, they don't move unless you poke them.
Yes. The word implies that once you find this magical mathematical formula, say 8 hours here, 2 hours there, you can just lock it in and maintain it forever without any additional effort. But in reality, the state of your life is a moving target.
A moving target. I love that imagery.
It's very descriptive.
Yeah, and for those of you tracking how to speak about these complex situations naturally, a moving target is the perfect idiom. If something is a moving target, it means it is a goal or a situation that is constantly shifting and changing, making it incredibly difficult to hit or pin down.
That's a great explanation.
Think about archery. Hitting a target that is painted on a thick oak tree standing perfectly still is one thing, but hitting a target that is swooping around in unpredictable gale force winds, that is a moving target.
You nailed it. Because life is always throwing new variables at you, the beautiful, pristine balance you achieved on a quiet Tuesday might be completely shattered by a crisis on Thursday morning.
Yeah, like your car breaking down or a kid getting sick.
Absolutely. You have to constantly adjust, pivot, and readjust your efforts, week by week, sometimes hour by hour. It is a dynamic state, never a static one.
But here is what I struggle with, and a lot of people listening will nod their heads at this. I want to push back on the psychology of this for a moment.
Go ahead.
If most adults eventually discover through hard experience that unlimited time and energy do not exist, if we know deep down that the finish line is a complete myth, why do we still feel that intense whispering guilt when we try to carve out space for ourselves?
It's a really fair question.
I mean, why is the pressure so crushing, even when we consciously know the game is rigged?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the macro environment, it's because modern life has fundamentally transformed, creating immense, invisible structural pressures that simply did not exist a few decades ago.
Invisible structural pressures.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you want to take the personal blame away, if you want to banish that guilt, you have to understand the 4 unique modern forces that are constantly systematically working against you. Think of them as the 4 horsemen of modern imbalance.
The 4 horsemen. That is ominous, but it feels incredibly accurate. Okay, let's go through them. What is the first force running us all into the ground?
The first force is always on technology. Specifically, how smartphones and cloud computing have completely and utterly erased the physical boundary between the office and your living room.
Oh, without a doubt. It's the dreaded 9 p.m. Sunday evening work email.
Yes, that exact scenario.
You're watching a movie, your phone buzzes on the coffee table, you glance at the glowing screen, and boom, your weekend is instantly over. You're back at your desk in your mind.
And we need to explain the mechanics of why that happens, because it isn't just a mild annoyance. It is a profound physiological and psychological disruption.
Okay, lay some science on us.
Researchers in occupational health use a specific term for this mechanism: psychological detachment. This refers to your brain's cognitive ability to mentally switch off from work-related thoughts and shift your nervous system out of a state of arousal during non-work hours.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the biology of this.
Yeah.
So if I am physically sitting on my comfortable couch wearing sweatpants, but my brain is frantically trying to figure out how to reply to my boss's passive-aggressive email tomorrow morning, I have not psychologically detached at all.
That is it entirely. From a neurological standpoint, your brain doesn't easily distinguish between a physical threat in the room and an emotional threat in your inbox.
Oh, wow. So my brain thinks the email is a tiger.
Pretty much. When you read that email, your amygdala fires, your body releases cortisol, the stress hormone, and your fight or flight response activates. Without psychological detachment, your physical time away from work is utterly useless for recovery.
That is wild.
It is. Your physical body might be resting on the soft sofa, but your nervous system is still pacing the floors of the office. Your brain is still burning metabolic energy as if you were sitting at your desk under fluorescent lights.
Which perfectly explains that terrible phenomenon where you can have a whole weekend off, do absolutely no physical labor, and still wake up on Monday morning feeling completely and utterly exhausted. The engine never actually turned off.
Spot on.
Okay, that is a huge one. What is the second force?
The second force is the societal shift to dual income norms, combined with a heavily researched concept called invisible labor.
Right. We have to look at the history here. The traditional household manager role is largely a thing of the past.
It really is.
50 or 60 years ago, the dominant cultural model, flawed as it may have been, was that one person worked outside the home for a wage and one person managed the vast logistics of the home full-time. But now, in the vast majority of families, both partners are working full-time jobs.
Which leaves a massive echoing vacuum in the domestic sphere. The children's ever-changing schedules, the complex grocery lists tailored to everyone's dietary needs, remembering to book the pediatrician and the dentist appointments.
Realizing you are almost out of laundry detergent before Sunday night.
Yes. None of that logistical reality vanishes just because both parents are at the office. This brings us to a really crucial phrase for you to understand when describing this specific type of exhaustion: the mental load.
The mental load. This is such a vital concept. For those of you listening, you probably feel this every day, even if you didn't have a name for it.
It's universally felt, for sure.
The mental load isn't necessarily the physical act of doing the chore. It isn't the physical act of pushing the vacuum. It is the invisible, behind-the-scenes cognitive labor of tracking, planning, anticipating, and organizing absolutely everything to keep a life running.
Undoubtedly. It is essentially serving as the uncompensated project manager of a household. And the psychological data shows that this invisible labor still has to be carried by someone. It doesn't organize itself.
Right, someone has to know that the milk is low.
Exactly, or absolutely. And statistically, across almost all demographics, it often falls disproportionately on one partner, very often the mother, even when she works equal hours outside the home.
Which is just a recipe for exhaustion.
It is. This creates an entire secondary layer of severe cognitive exhaustion that isn't reflected in any job title, performance review, or paycheck. It drains a massive amount of cognitive bandwidth.
I love to think of it like having a dozen high-powered apps running constantly in the background on your smartphone. They're silently downloading data, tracking your location, and draining the battery.
That's a perfect analogy.
You look at your phone at noon, wondering why it's already dead when you barely made any calls, and it's because of the mental load running in the background. All right, moving on to the third force driving this modern imbalance.
The third force is structural economics, simply the rising cost of living.
Ah, yes, the money factor.
In many parts of the world, housing, healthcare, and education have outpaced wage growth so significantly that even having two full-time incomes isn't enough to feel truly financially secure anymore.
Right. It forces people into a corner where they have no choice but to optimize their time for money.
Yeah.
You have to take on mandatory overtime or pick up a second job or start a weekend side hustle just to keep your head above water and pay the mortgage.
And the brutal math of that is every single hour spent driving for a rideshare app or doing freelance graphic design at night is an hour eaten directly away from your family, your sleep, or your rest.
It's a structural economic trap, not a failure of willpower.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the fourth horseman, which I honestly think might be the most insidious one of all because it lives entirely in our heads.
The fourth force is our modern cultural obsession with productivity as an identity.
Oh, this one hurts. It is everywhere. You can't escape it.
Yeah, it really is pervasive. Over the last few decades, we have elevated human optimization to a moral virtue. You open any social media platform and you are immediately bombarded with content creators showing off their morning routines.
Oh my gosh, yes. Waking up at 4:30 a.m., plunging into freezing ice baths, drinking blended green juice with obscure supplements.
And mapping out their rigidly color-coded planners.
Yes. There is this massive, highly profitable ecosystem of hustle culture content that is specifically designed to remind you that someone else is out there working harder, faster, and smarter than you right now.
And it creates this horrible, vibrating background anxiety in our lives. It fundamentally frames the act of sitting still as a failure.
It really does.
If you are just resting on a Sunday afternoon, maybe sitting on the porch reading a fiction novel purely for fun, there is this little voice cultivated by our culture whispering in your ear saying, you are wasting precious time. You could be listening to an educational deep dive. You could be learning to code. You could be monetizing this relaxing hobby into an online store. Rest is falsely framed as a moral failure, a sign of laziness, rather than what it actually is, a fundamental biological necessity for a mammalian brain.
This raises a critical question for our discussion. What does the collision of these four forces actually look like for real people trying to navigate their daily lives?
It's usually quite chaotic.
Well, I have a fantastic narrative example from the materials to illustrate exactly that collision. Let's talk about Aisha.
Oh, Aisha's story is incredibly telling.
Aisha is a single mother working as an emergency room nurse in London. Now, by the very nature of healthcare, Aisha's shifts rotate constantly. Her circadian rhythm and sleep schedule are in total perpetual flux.
Which is incredibly hard on the body.
Yes, sometimes she works 3-day shifts in a row. Sometimes she flips to working nights for a week. But here is the massive friction point. Her son's school does not care at all about her rotating shifts.
Spot on. Society's core institutions, schools, banks, government offices, they operate on a very rigid traditional schedule that hasn't changed since the mid-20th century.
Absolutely. The math just doesn't work for her. The homework still needs to be checked every evening, the packed lunches still have to be made every morning, and the parent-teacher meetings still rigidly happen at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday.
Which she might be sleeping through because she worked the night shift.
Right. Aisha had this incredibly powerful, frustrating quote when talking about the endless stream of self-help advice she receives. She said, "People tell me to just manage my time better, as if the root problem is my spreadsheet and not the immovable fact that there are only 24 hours in a day and I am required to be awake for 20 of them."
That is a profound and very grounded realization. And it beautifully highlights the sheer absurdity of the self-help industry's obsession with time management hacks.
I mean, what is a calendar app going to do for her?
Nothing. When you are facing deep structural mismatches like rotating shift work, violently colliding with rigid school hours, compounded by the rising cost of living and the mental load of single parenting, giving someone a new time management technique is like handing a small plastic bucket to someone standing on the deck of a rapidly sinking ship.
It completely ignores the physics of the situation. For Aisha, and for so many of you listening right now who feel like you are drowning, the primary obstacle to balance is not a lack of personal discipline.
Not at all.
It is a fundamental mathematical mismatch between the overwhelming demands of modern life and the finite biological resources of time, physical energy, and money that any one human being actually possesses.
Which transitions us perfectly into understanding the stakes. If the pressure is this high, we have to examine the fallout.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we have to ask the hard question. What happens when we completely ignore these four forces?
It's not pretty.
What happens when we internalize the hustle culture, put our heads down, grit our teeth, and try to just brute force our way to productivity? What is the actual cost?
The consequences are severe, but the tricky part is that they are rarely sudden. The bill doesn't come due all at once. They don't happen overnight in a dramatic fashion.
So it's more of a slow burn.
Exactly. Undoubtedly. They accumulate invisibly. They creep up on you month after month, year after year, until the foundation of your well-being just cracks under the weight.
Let's talk about the physical toll first, because I think people misunderstand this. The word burnout gets thrown around a lot online. People will say, "I'm so burned out," when they just mean they had a long Thursday.
Yes, the term has been very diluted.
But the medical and psychological sources we are looking at make a really important scientific distinction between clinical burnout and just being ordinarily tired.
Yes, it is a crucial distinction. Ordinary tiredness, even deep fatigue, is eventually cured by a good night's sleep, a quiet weekend, or a short vacation. You rest, your energy returns.
Okay, so what is burnout then?
Burnout is a completely different physiological and psychological state. The World Health Organization actually recognizes it as an occupational phenomenon. It is a state of severe emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged, unrelenting stress.
Wow, so it's a recognized medical issue.
Absolutely. When people hit true burnout, their dopamine and serotonin systems are heavily depleted. They don't just feel sleepy. They describe a profound, terrifying numbness.
Numbness. That sounds scary.
It is. They feel entirely detached from the work or the people they used to care deeply about. They lose their fundamental capacity for empathy. And physically, the mechanisms are brutal. Their sleep architecture is ruined because elevated cortisol prevents deep REM sleep.
So even if they try to sleep, they can't.
Right. Their immune systems weaken because their bodies are constantly in fight or flight, and long-term, this chronic overwork is highly correlated with severe cardiovascular risks.
It is your body physically organizing a labor strike because your brain refused to give it a legally mandated break.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
But it isn't just our physical bodies that pay the price. The relational toll is devastating to read about. And this honestly breaks my heart, especially when it comes to the research on kids.
Yes, the data there is very sobering.
It shows something incredibly counterintuitive when it comes to the negative impact of overworked parents on children. The primary issue the kids report isn't a lack of financial resources or missed vacations. It is a lack of presence.
The phenomenon of the phantom parent.
Yes, the phantom parent. You are physically taking up space in the living room, but mentally, you are orbiting another planet. You are scrolling through work emails on your phone while your kid is excitedly trying to tell you about a drawing they made at school.
Or you are sitting on the edge of the bed, nodding along to a bedtime story, but your eyes are completely glazed over because your mind is racing, worrying about a hostile morning presentation you have to give.
Children, even very young ones, are incredibly perceptive, aren't they?
Very much so. They might not understand the abstract concept of a 30-year mortgage or an unread inbox, but they absolutely instinctively know when they do not have your authentic attention.
And what does that do over time?
Over time, that chronic lack of presence slowly erodes the fundamental emotional security they feel in the relationship.
And we see that exact same mechanism of erosion happening in adult romantic relationships too, right?
Unfortunately, yes. The tragic, silent evolution from deeply connected, passionate partners to mere logistical roommates.
Roommates managing a shared schedule. That exact phrase from the research really struck a chord with me.
It's very common.
Because it isn't usually a massive, fiery argument or dramatic betrayal that ends these relationships. It is just a slow starvation.
A slow starvation, yes.
It is two people who are so profoundly depleted by their jobs, the commute, and the invisible mental load that they have absolutely nothing left in the tank to give each other at the end of the day.
They just sit on opposite ends of the sofa in the dark, scrolling on their respective phones for a hit of cheap dopamine, occasionally breaking the silence, just to confirm who is picking up the dry cleaning tomorrow.
The romance, the intimacy, the connection, it is all slowly suffocated by endless logistics.
And perhaps the most quietly tragic toll of all is the deeply personal one, the slow process of losing yourself.
Oh, this happens so often, and it is terrifying. You wake up one morning in your 40s, the kids are a bit older, the career is finally somewhat stable, you take a breath, and you suddenly realize you have absolutely no hobbies.
None at all.
You've completely forgotten what you actually enjoy doing just for fun, completely separate from your identity as a parent or an employee. You don't know who you are when you are producing value for someone else.
Which brings us to a fantastic narrative example from the source material and a crucial piece of vocabulary that perfectly encapsulates this feeling. Tell us about Tom's journey.
Right, so Tom is a software engineer from Seattle. When he was younger, in his 20s, Tom was vibrant. He loved playing the acoustic guitar. He was in a local band. He went hiking in the Cascade Mountains almost every single weekend.
He was a huge part of his life.
It was a huge defining part of his identity. But then, as he described it to researchers, life happened. He got a big promotion to senior developer. He got married. He had a couple of kids. And somehow, over a decade, those hobbies just stopped.
Did he have a moment where he decided to give them up?
Not at all. He didn't have a grand epiphany where he quit. He described the loss of his identity using a brilliant phrase. He said, "It wasn't a decision. It was death by 1,000 cuts."
Death by 1,000 cuts. Let's ensure you deeply understand how this phrase functions in conversational English, because it is incredibly evocative.
Yes, let's break that one down.
Historically, it refers to a very dark, ancient form of punishment. But in modern, everyday English, it vividly describes a situation where a major failure, a loss of identity, or a disaster occurs not because of one huge dramatic blow or a single bad decision, but as the cumulative result of many, many small, seemingly minor problems, compromises, or negative actions over a long period.
Spot on. Losing his hobbies wasn't one dramatic moment where Tom threw his guitar in a dumpster, looked at the sky, and declared, "I will never play music again."
Right, that would be absurd.
There was 1,000 tiny, seemingly reasonable, totally justifiable trade-offs. It was saying, I'll just skip the hike this one weekend to finish this massive coding sprint for my boss.
And then the next weekend.
The next weekend it was, I'll just skip it because the baby is teething and we're exhausted. Then a month later it was, I'll just skip playing guitar today because I have to mow the lawn and I'm just too tired.
One tiny justifiable cut at a time.
Well, absolutely. One tiny cut at a time until the avid hiker and the passionate guitar player were entirely gone, leaving only the software engineer and the tired dad.
That is the truly insidious nature of modern imbalance.
Yeah.
It masterfully masquerades as temporary compromises. You tell yourself, it's just for this week, until those temporary compromises compound and become your permanent reality.
It's a scary thought.
So if we accept this reality, if the old mid-century model of 3 trains arriving perfectly is a trap, and the physiological and emotional costs of brute forcing our way through are this devastating crest, it raises the most important question of all.
How do we actually fix it?
Yes, how do we
We
fix it?
have to completely change the math. We have to fundamentally alter the equations we use to measure the success of our lives.
Elaborate on the mechanics of that. What do you mean by changing the math?
Well, the old math that most of us grew up with was based on this incredibly rigid daily 8-8-8 split. You know the one? It stems back to the industrial labor movements of the 19th century. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for family and personal recreation, and 8 hours for sleep.
Ah, yes. The perfect pie chart.
Every single day, neatly divided into a pie chart, balanced perfectly on a nice edge.
Right.
But that is the static equilibrium we were talking about earlier. For a modern knowledge worker or a parent, we know the daily 8-8-8 split is a statistical and practical impossibility.
Absolutely impossible. The modern world simply does not compartmentalize that neatly.
So the new math requires a broader perspective. It says that balance cannot and should not be measured in a single, frantic 24-hour period. It must be measured over much longer horizons, looking at your life in weeks, in months, or even across entire seasons of life.
This is a profound, life-altering mindset shift for high achievers.
How so?
It means recognizing and accepting that some weeks are simply going to be entirely unapologetically consumed by a major work deadline or a product launch. Your balance that week is going to be heavily, wildly skewed toward your career.
So you might barely see your family that week.
Right, you might barely see them, but perhaps the following week, the launch is over, but your child catches the flu and your balance swings entirely 100% toward family care and work gets the bare minimum.
That makes total sense.
That wild variability is not a sign that you are failing at being a balanced adult.
Yeah.
It is a sign that you are responding appropriately and dynamically to the realities of a complex life.
And it isn't just about the mathematical allocation of hours, is it? It is about the quality and texture of the time you are spending in each of those buckets.
Quality over quantity.
Yeah. There's some fascinating research we reviewed regarding the intersection of technology and human connection.
Yes, data from leading sociologists who study how our devices fracture our attention have found something vital. They've found that genuine relationship-building connection requires undivided, sustained attention.
Like actually looking at someone.
Absolutely. It requires eye contact, active listening, and mirroring. But the highly encouraging part of this data for busy people is that this undivided attention doesn't have to last for hours on end to be deeply neurologically effective.
This was the absolute biggest aha moment for me when looking through the sources. The revelation that 20 minutes, just 20 uninterrupted minutes of fully present, completely phone-free, eye-to-eye time with a child or a partner can actually fundamentally outweigh 2 solid hours of physically being in the same room with them while you're distracted, glancing at a laptop or watching TV.
Undoubtedly, the quality of attention profoundly measurably trumps the mere quantity of hours.
So 20 minutes is all it takes.
Often, yes. When you look someone in the eye and give them your undivided attention, you are sending a biological and emotional signal to their nervous system that they are the most important thing in your world in that moment.
That is so powerful.
It builds incredible, lasting relational security. It builds trust far more than just being a warm, distracted body in the room for an entire Saturday afternoon while your mind is miles away.
This psychological shift leads perfectly into the story of Elena. She is a small business owner and a mother of 3. Elena used to completely tear herself apart mentally, trying to be a perfect 10 out of 10 in every single category of her life, every single day.
A very heavy burden to carry.
It really was. She demanded of herself that she be a 10 as a visionary CEO, a 10 as a patient mom, a 10 as an attentive wife, a 10 at the gym, and a 10 at keeping a spotless house.
Which, again, is a mathematical and biological impossibility unless you have a staff of 20 people and you never, ever sleep.
Right. She was perpetually exhausted and felt like a failure in all categories because she was spreading herself too thin. So Elena completely redefined her math. She stopped aiming for straight 10s across the board.
So what did she do instead?
She realized and accepted that on a Tuesday, when she has a massive product launch for her business, she might be a 9 at work that day, but she's consciously going to be a 4 as a parent.
A 4 out of 10 as a parent? That sounds scary to admit.
I know, but it worked. She is going to order a greasy pizza for the kids, let them watch 2 extra hours of TV, and she isn't going to feel guilty about it. But then on Saturday, the launch is over, the laptop goes into a drawer, and she is a 9 as a deeply present parent and a 0 at work.
And what we need to heavily emphasize here is that allowing certain areas of your life to intentionally coast temporarily is not a moral failure. It is strategic resource management.
I love that word, coast. Think about riding a bicycle. Coasting is when you take your feet off the pedals, stop expending intense energy, and just let the bike's existing forward momentum carry you down the hill for a bit while you catch your breath.
Spot on. Coasting in certain areas of your life is a profound relief and a vital psychological survival strategy. You simply cannot sprint at maximum speed in every direction at once. Physics doesn't allow it.
So you have to pick your sprints.
Yes. Deliberately, consciously choosing where you are going to aggressively excel today and where you are going to allow things to simply be good enough is the absolute hallmark of someone who has actually found a sustainable rhythm.
Okay, so mindset shifts are fantastic. Changing the math makes sense intellectually. I feel significantly lighter just thinking about not having to be a 10 out of 10 today.
It's a huge relief.
But we have to ground this conversation for you, the listener, in reality. Because you're probably driving in your car right now asking, okay, that's great theory, but what can I actually do on a chaotic Tuesday morning when the dog is sick, my boss is yelling, and everything is falling apart?
Yeah.
We need practical tactics for the trenches.
Let's transition from theory into highly practical strategies. The first, and perhaps most crucial in our hyper-connected digital world, revolves around physical boundaries and devices.
Boundaries and devices.
Okay. We talked earlier about the necessity of psychological detachment. To achieve that cognitive shift, you often need literal physical separation from the technology that binds you to your stressors.
This is so practical. A lot of the behavioral experts suggest using completely separate physical devices for work and personal life if you have the luxury to do so. A work phone and a personal phone.
That's the ideal scenario, yes.
But if you can't afford 2 phones or your company doesn't provide one, it is about ruthlessly, mercilessly managing your app notifications and screen time settings.
The primary goal is to ensure that casually picking up your personal phone to text a friend, check the weather, or look at a recipe doesn't accidentally pull you into a dark vortex of workplace anxiety because you suddenly saw a chat notification pop up from your manager.
Out of sight, out of mind?
Exactly. You have to build digital and physical walls around your attention to protect your peace.
Strategy number 2 is something I like to call protecting your non-negotiable time.
This is vital for shifting the power dynamic in your own life. Most people treat their personal time, their health, and their family time as the scraps. They treat it as whatever arbitrary minutes are left over after work is entirely done.
But there's a problem with that, right?
A huge problem. Because of Parkinson's law, the adage that work will inevitably expand to fill all available time allotted for its completion, there is never, ever anything left over.
You nailed it. If you want to find a rhythm, you have to completely invert that dynamic. You have to treat family dinner or your Saturday morning run or your weekly date night with the exact same immovable, non-negotiable heavyweight as a meeting with your absolute most important $1 million client.
That's a great way to think about it.
Think about it. If the CEO of your company asked for a meeting at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, you wouldn't just skip it because you were feeling a little tired or because you wanted to organize your desk. You would be there. You have to be the CEO of your own Saturday morning run. You have to show up for yourself with that same level of professional respect.
Which naturally leads us to the third strategy, which is arguably the hardest psychological hurdle for many people listening today, mastering the art of saying no.
Oh, saying no is so hard.
It is. But if we analyze the hidden economics of time, we realize that time is a zero-sum game. Every single yes you utter out loud is an implicit, unavoidable no to something else in your life.
Oh, man. That is a tough pill to swallow when you really map it out. It means every single time I say yes to joining a new optional committee at work because I want to look like a team player, I am silently, automatically saying no to an hour of sleep or an hour playing with my kids or an hour of reading a book on the couch.
The time has to come from somewhere.
It does.
Undoubtedly. And high achievers in particular struggle with this mentally. Look at your entire life pattern. Throughout your education and your early career, saying yes has always been highly rewarded.
Yes, I can take on that extra credit project.
Right. Yes, I can stay late to help at the pitch. It got you good grades, praise from teachers, and early promotions. You were conditioned to be a yes person.
But eventually, that backfires.
It does. As your responsibilities grow, there is a distinct tipping point where universally saying yes goes from being a career accelerator to becoming actively self-destructive. You have to learn the difficult skill of politely but firmly declining requests in order to protect the bandwidth for the things that actually matter long-term.
Strategy number 4 is all about outsourcing and delegating. And this one really surgically targets the perfectionists out there.
It absolutely does. Outsourcing takes many forms. It might mean paying a service to clean the house once a month, or using a grocery delivery app if you have the financial means to buy back a few hours of your weekend.
And if money is tight?
If money is tight, delegating is just as crucial. It means demanding that childcare and household responsibilities are shared equitably with a partner. It means telling your able-bodied teenagers that they are now 100% responsible for washing and folding their own laundry.
But here is the massive catch, the emotional hurdle you have to let go of, the perfectionism.
Yes, the hardest part.
If your teenager folds the towels into chaotic, lumpy squares instead of crisp hotel-style folds, or if your partner loads the dishwasher in a highly inefficient way that drives your type A brain mildly crazy, you have to just take a deep breath, close your eyes, and accept it.
Just let it go.
You have to realize that their way is good enough, because accepting it buys back your precious mental energy. You are actively trading perfectly folded towels for your own long-term sanity.
A very wise, highly profitable trade in the economics of well-being. And that preserved sanity allows you the energy for our fifth strategy, engaging in genuine physiological recovery.
We touched on this briefly earlier, but it is worth a real deep dive because people get this completely wrong. We need to explain the immense difference between fake, passive rest and genuine, active restoration.
The distinction is neurological. Many people finish a grueling, cortisol-soaked day, collapse horizontally on the sofa, and scroll through social media or watch intense television for 2 hours.
And they think that's resting.
They fundamentally think they are resting simply because their physical body is horizontal and not moving. But passive, highly stimulating digital entertainment is actually continuously pinging your amygdala and draining your cognitive reserves. It is keeping your brain engaged in a state of low-level threat assessment.
Genuine recovery requires activities that actually pay dividends in energy. It might require a tiny bit of activation energy up front, like forcing yourself to put on your shoes to go for a 20-minute walk in a green space, or doing a bit of light stretching, or picking up a creative, tactile hobby like painting, gardening, or playing an instrument.
Exactly, things that engage the brain differently.
But unlike doom scrolling, these activities engage different parts of the brain, specifically the parasympathetic nervous system, which actually replenishes your mental state and lowers your heart rate.
Let's bring in a real-world corporate example of someone implementing these boundaries, because it reveals a lot about the invisible prisons we build for ourselves. The story of David from the case studies is incredibly illustrative of the unseen barriers we create.
Yes, David's story blew my mind. David was struggling immensely with his daily schedule. He had a brutal commute, and he desperately wanted to shift his working hours to start earlier and leave earlier so he could actually be present for his kids in the late afternoon before they went to sleep.
A very reasonable desire.
But he suffered in total silence for 2 entire years because he was absolutely terrified to ask his manager for the accommodation. He was convinced, based on corporate culture, that asking for a shifted schedule would instantly make him look uncommitted, lazy, or not management material.
And what actually happened when the pain finally outweighed the fear and he asked?
His manager didn't even blink. She literally just looked at him and said, "Of course, David, that's completely fine as long as your work gets done. Why did you ask sooner?"
Wow, 2 years for nothing.
David had spent 2 entire years of his life suffering, missing his kids' afternoons, grinding himself into dust for absolutely nothing. He was trapped in a cage, completely constructed of his own false assumptions.
It highlights a critical, actionable point for our listeners. Many employers, especially in the modern post-pandemic working world, are far more open to flexible arrangements than employees assume, but they are not mind readers. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to propose the boundaries.
I came up with an analogy for this while reviewing David's story and the other sources. I want you to picture this. It is like we are guarding this incredible, impenetrable steel bank vault that holds all of our precious time, our energy, and our health.
Okay, I see the vault.
We stand at the front door looking tough, putting a huge padlock on it. We tell ourselves we value our time. But then, because we are so deeply afraid of being impolite or looking unhelpful to our peers, we leave the back door of the vault wide open, swinging in the breeze, inviting every single incoming request from a boss, a needy colleague, or a neighborhood committee to just walk in and take whatever they want.
That is perfectly stated. It exposes the hypocrisy of how we manage our lives. You are fiercely protective in theory, but completely willingly vulnerable in practice.
So if these strategies, setting digital boundaries, treating time like a CEO, saying no, delegating laundry, asking for flex time, if they're so practical, logical, and straightforward, why is it so incredibly hard for you and me to actually implement them on a daily basis?
Because of the invisible, heavy psychological tax we touched on at the very beginning of our conversation, guilt. The inner critic, that voice in your head, is the single biggest obstacle to finding a sustainable rhythm. The logistics are easy, but the emotions are hard.
The guilt tax is absolutely relentless. It spares no one. Working parents feel immense guilt for not being home enough, convinced they are ruining their children. Stay-at-home parents feel guilt because they aren't earning a salary or using their degrees.
Employees feel guilt for logging off at 5 p.m.
And literally everyone feels a spike of guilt the second they try to take 1 hour on a Sunday just for personal rest. It is like a rigged game where you can't win.
What's truly fascinating here from a psychological perspective is the drastic difference in how we speak to ourselves versus how we speak to others. Researchers investigating the psychology of self-compassion have proposed a very illuminating practical thought experiment to expose this double standard.
Oh, the friend test. This is brilliant, and I want everyone listening to try this right now. If you listening right now have a close, beloved friend who comes to you in tears and says, "I am so exhausted. I'm working 60-hour weeks. My boss is demanding. I have a toddler who won't sleep, and I feel like I'm completely failing at everything in my life."
A heartbreaking situation for a friend to be in.
What would you actually say to them? Would you look them in the eye and tell them they are lazy? Would you tell them they just need to download a new calendar app, wake up at 5 a.m., and try harder to be perfect?
Of course you wouldn't. If you are a halfway decent friend, you would offer deep empathy. You would validate their struggle. You would acknowledge the immense objective difficulty of their situation.
You would probably give them a hug.
You would likely put a hand on their shoulder and strongly encourage them to be kinder to themselves, to lower their standards temporarily, and to take a desperately needed break.
But when we look in the mirror, we are ruthless. We are so unbelievably cruel to ourselves. The voice in our head demands absolute perfection under completely impossible, chaotic circumstances. We would never speak to a friend the way we speak to ourselves.
Shifting that internal dialogue from relentless, punishing self-criticism to realistic, grounded self-compassion is arguably the most important foundational strategy of all. Because without it, the boundaries will always fail.
And we should probably clarify what self-compassion actually is, right?
Yes. It doesn't mean lowering your standards permanently or giving up on your ambitions. It means recognizing that you are a biological human being operating within real physical and temporal constraints, doing the absolute best you can with the limited resources available to you on any given day.
And we have to talk about the accelerant. We have to talk about the high-octane gasoline that constantly gets poured on the fire of our inner critic every single day, social media.
Ah, yes, the highlight reel, the great distorting lens of our time.
Spotlessly put, the absolute toxicity of comparing your unfiltered, chaotic, messy, behind-the-scenes Tuesday morning reality to someone else's carefully curated, heavily edited, filtered highlight reel online.
It's a trap we all fall into.
You log on and see a post from an influencer or an old college classmate who seems to flawlessly, effortlessly balance a massive corporate career, a spotless minimalist home, and perfectly behaved, styled children who are happily eating organic broccoli with a smile.
It triggers deep feelings of inadequacy. But what you do not see, what is deliberately hidden from the frame, is the screaming argument they had with their spouse 10 minutes before the photo was taken.
You don't see the massive, chaotic pile of dirty laundry shoved hastily just outside the camera frame.
You don't see the credit card debt funding the aesthetic, or the sheer bone-deep exhaustion they feel when the ring light finally turns off. Comparing your unedited reality to their artificially staged photograph is a guaranteed foolproof recipe for absolute misery.
It is so vital to constantly remind yourself that literally everyone is dealing with a massive mess behind the scenes. No one's platform is uncrowded.
A very important reminder.
Okay, to prove that this isn't just academic theory, and that you do not have to quit your corporate job and move to an off-grid cabin in the woods to find peace, let's look at two people who successfully found their rhythm through very specific micro-adjustments.
Let's start with Priya, the hospital administrator we reviewed from Toronto. Her case is very instructive.
Priya's story is deeply relatable for anyone mid-career. She described herself as drowning in obligations. She was constantly exhausted, she found herself snapping at her kids over minor things, and she was starting to deeply resent a career in healthcare that she historically loved.
But she couldn't just quit. She is the primary earner. She couldn't just drop her massive responsibilities and walk away.
So realizing she couldn't change the macro structure of her life, she didn't attempt one massive, cinematic, blowing up her life change. She made small, highly strategic micro-adjustments to her daily environment.
Let's look at the specific levers she pulled.
First, she advocated for herself and negotiated one single work-from-home day a week. Just one day, specifically to eliminate her grueling 2-hour round-trip commute and buy back some time.
That's a solid boundary.
Second, she instituted a strict no phones at the dinner table rule for the entire family, forcing a pocket of undivided attention. And my personal favorite, the one that sounds counterintuitive, she actively started waking up 30 minutes earlier.
Which usually sounds like terrible advice for an exhausted person.
I know, but here is the key: not to work. Not to answer emails, not to do a grueling workout, not to optimize her life or learn a language. She woke up early just to sit in a chair and drink a warm cup of coffee in absolute unbroken, glorious silence before the chaotic machinery of the house woke up.
And what was the measurable outcome of those 3 seemingly minor micro-adjustments?
She reported to the researchers that she isn't actually any less busy. The raw volume of tasks on her plate is exactly the same, but she feels fundamentally different. She feels less scattered.
Less scattered, that's a great outcome.
She feels like she is actually anchoring her day and is present for her life, rather than always leaning forward, heart racing, panicking about the very next thing on the endless to-do list.
That is the very essence of a sustainable rhythm. It is about taking back small pockets of control. Now, let's contrast Priya's approach with Marcus, a freelance graphic designer living in Austin. His environmental challenge was entirely different.
Marcus fell into the classic, modern remote work trap that so many people experienced recently. He loved the idea of the flexibility of self-employment. But because his office was quite literally a desk in the corner of his living room, he had absolute zero physical boundaries between his labor and his rest.
The living room was the office, and the office was the living room.
He found himself answering client emails at 11 p.m. from the couch because, well, the laptop was right there staring at him. The days and nights completely blurred into one endless, stressful, amorphous work soup. He never fully clocked in, but he never fully clocked out either.
His solution to this boundaryless existence was incredibly clever in its psychological simplicity. He implemented what he called a fake commute.
A fake commute. I love this concept so much. Even though he worked from home, Marcus forced a routine. He would wake up, shower, get dressed in actual work clothes, physically walk out his front door and walk 4 blocks to a local coffee shop.
Just to get out of the house.
He would buy his coffee, read the news on his phone for 10 minutes, and then turn around and walk back home to sit at his desk and officially start his workday. And he did the exact same routine in reverse in the evening at 5:30 p.m. to firmly clock out.
This isn't just a quirky habit. This is a brilliant neurological trick based on how our brains process spatial memory and context. In psychology, there is a phenomenon often referred to as the doorway effect, where crossing physical thresholds helps the brain compartmentalize tasks and memories.
So crossing the threshold literally resets his brain.
Yes. By physically leaving the space, walking outside and returning, Marcus gave his brain the necessary physical and environmental cues to definitively differentiate between work mode and home mode. It forcibly facilitated that crucial psychological detachment we discussed earlier, even though he was returning to the exact same building.
It just proves that balance never arrives via a fairy godmother with a magic wand granting one massive dramatic overhaul of your life. It is the result of tiny, consistent, iterative experiments.
You just have to try things.
You try a fake commute. If it works for your brain, keep it. If it doesn't, discard it and try waking up 30 minutes early like Priya. You are the scientist of your own life.
However, there is a massive, crucial caveat to all of this practical advice. If you are listening right now and thinking, great, I'll just copy Priya's exact morning routine or Marcus's fake commute tomorrow and my life will be fixed, I must strongly caution you.
What's the catch?
The concept of balance or rhythm is highly acutely dependent on what specific season of life you are currently navigating.
Seasons of life. This is such a compassionate, realistic way to look at the long arc of our journeys.
Yeah.
Because your emotional and physical capacity changes drastically depending on the specific season you are currently standing in.
Undoubtedly. To illustrate this, consider the season of a newlywed couple in their late 20s without children. Generally speaking, they possess an abundant amount of flexibility and discretionary time.
They can sleep in on weekends.
Yes, they can choose to work late to build their careers, sleep in until noon on weekends to recover, or travel spontaneously. Their rhythm easily accommodates a high degree of career focus intertwined with heavy leisure.
But then imagine a massive transition. Transition that same couple into the season of being new parents. We're talking about the intense, chaotic first year of a baby's life.
The paradigm shifts completely. In that specific season, the very definition of balance shrinks drastically down to mere biological survival.
Survival mode.
Balance no longer means succeeding at work while traveling on weekends. Balance means somehow managing to get 3 consecutive hours of uninterrupted sleep. It means remembering to eat a hot meal with protein. It means actively working to keep your romantic partnership from fracturing under the immense stress of sleep deprivation and hormone shifts.
In that particular season, your personal hobbies like Tom's guitar playing or hiking are naturally going to take a back seat. They have to. And this is vital for you to hear that's not a failure.
Not at all.
Putting your guitar in the closet for a year because you have a colicky newborn is an appropriate, highly logical response to an intense life transition. It is honoring the limitations of the season you are in, rather than fighting a losing battle against reality.
And it is important to remember that these seasons continue to evolve as we age. They don't stop after early adulthood. Which brings us to a fantastic, highly descriptive idiom that perfectly captures a very difficult, stressful season many people find themselves in later in life. We need to discuss the sandwich generation.
The sandwich generation. This is such a brilliant visual. If you haven't encountered this C1 phrase before in your reading, picture a literal sandwich where you are the meat, caught right in the middle, being squished from both sides.
It's a very uncomfortable position to be in.
It refers to a demographic of people, usually in their late 40s, 50s, or early 60s, who are quite literally squeezed between two massive, competing caretaking responsibilities. On one side, pushing down from the top, they are still heavily supporting their own adult children, maybe helping them financially through college, or letting them move back home during a tough economy.
And on the other side?
But on the other side, pushing up from the bottom, they are suddenly, unexpectedly having to care for their own aging elderly parents who are experiencing health declines or dementia.
And all the while, as they're being squeezed from both sides by the people they love, they're simultaneously trying to manage their own declining health and frantically trying to prepare for their own imminent retirement.
The pressure must be unimaginable.
The emotional, financial, and logistical pressure from both above and below is immense. If you are currently in the sandwich generation, your daily rhythm, your expectations, and your boundaries are going to look radically, fundamentally different from someone in their 20s.
I completely agree, but here is a genuine pushback question for you, because this is where I think the rubber meets the road. I understand intellectually acknowledging the season you are in. It makes sense. But how do we actually practically recognize when a season of life is naturally ending?
That's a really good question.
Because I think a lot of us get stuck. We keep operating with the high alert stress levels and the defensive habits of a previous chaotic season long after the crisis has passed, and we don't adjust our rhythm until we finally just break from the unnecessary tension.
That is an incredibly perceptive question, and it identifies a major trap. Recognizing the shifting of seasons requires intentional, quiet self-reflection, which is precisely the one thing that the loud, frantic hustle culture prevents us from doing.
Because we're always running.
Yes, you have to force yourself to periodically pause, maybe every 6 months, and conduct an honest audit of your life. Ask yourself the hard questions. Are the kids actually more independent now, meaning I don't need to hover as much? Has that massive, stressful integration project at work finally concluded? Is the health crisis with your parents stabilizing into a manageable routine?
So it is about staying actively awake at the wheel, rather than just driving on autopilot.
You nailed it. You must remain dynamically responsive to evolving circumstances, rather than rigidly clinging to old routines and defense mechanisms that simply no longer serve you. The ultimate goal of this entire framework is not to achieve a permanent, unchanging equilibrium. The goal is adaptability.
Adaptability. I think that is the absolute perfect word to anchor us as we bring this deep dive to a close. So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and summarize the overarching theme we have explored today.
It means that perfect balance, that shiny mid-century fantasy of the 3 trains arriving flawlessly on schedule without any friction, is a destructive, impossible myth that is actively harming your mental health. But a sustainable, imperfect, highly dynamic rhythm is entirely within your grasp, regardless of the chaos happening on the platform around you.
It is about fundamentally changing the math of how you measure a successful week. It is about aggressively setting physical and digital boundaries to protect your undivided attention for the people who matter. It is about actively replacing the harsh, demanding voice of your inner critic with genuine, supportive self-compassion.
And honoring your season of life.
Yes, giving yourself the grace and permission to honor the specific, unique season of life you are standing in right now.
And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a core, provocative question to reflect on as you go about the rest of your day, drawn straight from the profound insights we've shared. If you looked honestly, objectively, at how you actually spent your hours this past week, not how you intended to spend them, but how you actually spent them, would those hours accurately reflect what you claim truly matters to you? And if the answer is a painful no, what is one small, realistic micro-adjustment you could make starting today?
To build on that final thought, I want you to visualize your life right now. Think about all the heavy balls you are constantly juggling in the air. Work projects, family expectations, fitness goals, social obligations, maintaining a clean house. They are all up in the air.
Juggling is exhausting.
What is one ball you are fiercely juggling today that you could just deliberately let drop, knowing in your heart that it is made of rubber and will simply bounce back later, and not made of fragile glass? Think about it. Find the rubber ball and give yourself permission to let it drop.
A very powerful, liberating thought to carry forward into the week.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this has shifted your perspective, relieved some of that lingering guilt, and given you some great natural English vocabulary to articulate your own journey along the way. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you never miss a deep dive with us. Until next time, take a deep breath, find your own unique rhythm, and we will see you soon.